Eddie Murphy's been the king of comedy for decades.
Good morning, my neighbors! Hey, you! Yes! Yes! You too!
But behind the jokes, things weren't always funny, because there was a list of celebrities who mocked him, disrespected him, or tried to tear him down.
And I was like, I'm not doing my routine in the parking lot. And he said, you. And I was with John Land. He said, and he said, you too, white man. If I had a knife, if I had a gun, I'd shoot the both of you.
These are the 5 celebrities Eddie Murphy hated the most. And why? 1. Kevin Hart. It started quietly. No onstage blowups, no headlines. But if you look closely, you'll notice Eddie Murphy and Kevin Hart never really shared space. And there's a reason.
Eddie Murphy, when I saw Raw in my younger age, wasn't supposed to be watching it. So I'm sneaking.
No. That or Delirious.
And watching it. I watch it, but the idea of that many people showing up for an event to laugh was insane.
In 2012, Kevin Hart made a bold claim. He said his comedy special Laugh at My Pain had beaten the box office record set by Murphy's legendary Raw. But the problem is, that wasn't true. Murphy didn't fire back with heat. He didn't call him out by name, but in an interview years later, he made it clear. Raw was still the #1 box office comedy concert of all time. And he said it in that calm but cutting way.
Ain't nobody, Raw is still the #1 box office concert movie in history, so I don't know what records nobody broke.
That alone might have been brushed off as ego. But this feud wasn't just about numbers. It was about loyalty. Because while Kevin Hart was rising fast in Hollywood, another comedian, Cat Williams, was calling him out hard. Cat claimed Kevin was being handed roles that others turned down because they were cooning, degrading, or built on stereotypes. He said Hart avoided real controversy and played the game, while others paid the price. And Eddie didn't stay neutral. He and Cat go way back. The mutual respect between them runs deep. Murphy didn't need to throw shade. His silence toward Kevin said it all. No collaborations, no endorsements, no love. Just quiet distance from a man who doesn't speak unless it matters. And that distance only grew when Hart's name started coming up in conversations about the next Eddie Murphy. Because Eddie doesn't play comparisons, especially when the path taken wasn't earned the same way. So while Kevin Hart may never hear it directly, the message is clear. Eddie doesn't hate publicly, but he never forgets who tried to rewrite his legacy. But if Kevin was the quiet freeze-out, the next name on the list got hit with something colder and more direct. A phone call that would change everything and expose a long-buried double standard. Bill Cosby. Before the world saw his downfall, Bill Cosby was seen as a role model, America's dad, a clean comic who positioned himself above the rest. But behind that polished image was a man who made one call that Eddie Murphy never forgot. In the early 1980s, at the height of Murphy's rise, Cosby reached out. Not to congratulate him, not to offer support, but to lecture him. He told Murphy his material was too dirty, that he should clean up his act.
About a year ago and chastised me on the phone for being too dirty on stage, and it was real weird because I had never met him, and he just thought he should call me up because he was Bill and tell me that he did about what.
Eddie had never even met him before that call. Yet here was Cosby, a legend, using his position to scold a young comedian still finding his voice. And that rubbed Eddie the wrong way. It wasn't just the content, it was the tone, the arrogance. The assumption that Cosby had the right to control how another black comic expressed himself on stage. Murphy held his tongue at first, but over time the resentment boiled over. In his 1987 stand-up, Eddie finally let it out. He mocked the call and delivered a punchline aimed straight at Cosby.
Hell, I said have a Coke and a smile and shut the fuck up.
And decades later, when Cosby's crimes finally came to light, Murphy didn't hide his feelings. On SNL in 2019, he reminded the world that the man who once called him out was now behind bars.
Told me 30 years ago that I would be this boring, stay-at-home, house dad, and Bill Cosby would be in jail.
It was more than a joke. It was closure. The man who tried to shame him had been exposed, and Eddie was still standing. But the next name on Eddie's list didn't lecture him in private. He mocked him on national TV with a single sentence that would fuel a 30-year grudge. 3. David Spade. It was just one line, one sarcastic punchline. But it hit Eddie Murphy like a slap in the face, and the sting lasted for 3 decades.
Took a shot at Eddie Murphy, famously, in a joke, but he called you.
Yeah.
In 1995, Saturday Night Live was deep in its edgy era. David Spade, with his trademark smirk, was hosting the Her Hollywood Minute segment, a fast, sarcastic rundown of celebrity jabs. That night, he held up a photo of Eddie Murphy and said,
"Look, children, it's a falling star. Make a wish."
The audience laughed, but Murphy didn't. At the time, Vampire in Brooklyn had flopped at the box office, and Spade's joke wasn't just about the movie. It was aimed at Murphy's entire career. A career that ironically had helped save SNL from collapse in the 80s. To Murphy, this wasn't a roast. It was betrayal. He had carried that show on his back. Now, a guy standing on the platform he helped build was taking cheap shots.
A setup for some white dude to be in. So you don't have people watching your back, and you don't have support groups.
But the worst part? It didn't feel like comedy. It felt personal. And as Murphy later said, it even felt racial. In a 2024 interview with the New York Times, Murphy finally opened up.
That was a cheap shot, and it was kind of racist.
He didn't respond on air, but behind the scenes, he was furious. Murphy called the SNL offices, asking to speak with Spade. When the receptionist said, "Eddie Murphy is on line 1, Spade reportedly panicked. The man who joked so casually froze when faced with the person he mocked. When they finally spoke, Murphy's words cut deep.
I was in-house. I'm one of the family, and you fucking with me like that?
After that call, Murphy cut all ties. He stopped attending SNL reunions, avoided events where Spade would be. For 30 years, they never shared a stage, a show, or a moment. Spade eventually apologized. In interviews, in his memoir, and on air. And in 2025, they crossed paths backstage at an SNL anniversary special. They shared a brief hug. It looked civil, but insiders knew the truth. It wasn't forgiveness, it was formality. And if Spade's joke was a jab, the next name on the list hit with something far more dangerous, a direct threat, shouted face to face. 4. Paul Mooney. Eddie Murphy was used to tension in comedy, but nothing prepared him for the moment Paul Mooney confronted him, live backstage with real heat in his voice.
Told me a story about how Paul Mooney tried to beat you up outside of the Comedy Store.
It was the early 1980s, and Murphy had just finished a killer set at the Comedy Store. He was still new to the scene, but the crowd loved him. He was electric and untouchable, but he didn't know who was waiting next. It was Paul Mooney.
They gave me the light the first time I was at the Comedy Store. Paul Mooney and them, they gave me the light because I was going on. I just kept going and going. I hadn't met Paul Mooney yet, and they gave me the light. And I was like first year SNL.
And Mooney didn't just want the stage. He wanted respect. To him, Murphy was flashy, too polished, and too friendly to white audiences. In Mooney's eyes, Eddie wasn't representing black comedy. He was selling it out. When Eddie finally walked off stage, Mooney was waiting. He didn't hold back. He cursed at Murphy, threatened him, said if he had a gun, he would have shot both Eddie and his friend on the spot.
If I had a gun, I'd shoot the both of you.
It wasn't a joke. It wasn't hyperbole. The energy was real, ugly, and explosive. They were inches from a full-blown fight when Richard Pryor stepped in and told Mooney to back off. "You're being too hard on that kid," Pryor said. And just like that, the confrontation diffused, but the damage stuck. Murphy didn't fight back. He just took note. From that moment on, their relationship stayed cold. They saw each other, nodded if necessary, but never again tried to connect. For Murphy, that night wasn't just about ego or stage time. It was a reminder that not all hate comes from outside the community. And if Mooney brought confrontation face to face, the next name came with something even heavier: admiration, twisted by jealousy. 5. Richard Pryor. To Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor was the blueprint, the rawest, the funniest, and the realest. But the closer he got to his idol, the more complicated things became. At first, the relationship was built on respect. Eddie praised Pryor publicly, gave him credit for opening doors, even visited him to personally hand over a copy of his first comedy album.
Yeah, and he was Richard. So I had a copy of my album, my first comedy album. I went over and I said, "Mr. Pryor, I'm ready. You listen."
But fame changes everything. As Murphy's stardom skyrocketed in the 1980s, Blockbusters, sold-out shows, global buzz, Pryor began to pull back. What started as mentorship slowly turned into tension. On the set of Harlem Nights, it all came to the surface. According to Pryor's former bodyguard, Richard quietly confessed during filming.
And I remember Richard saying to me, Eddie don't like me. He don't like me, he don't like me.
The truth was, Eddie had started keeping his distance. He respected Pryor, but the warmth was gone. One day, Pryor and his team visited Murphy at his house during production. But Eddie, busy with work, didn't greet them the way Pryor expected. That hurt him. And instead of brushing it off, Pryor lashed out. He called Eddie out, publicly, bitterly. And Murphy, done with the silent treatment, responded with sarcasm and distance. Behind the scenes, the tension was thick. On set, Pryor would sit on the steps, watching Eddie work in silence. Like a veteran trying to size up the rookie who'd already replaced him. Even Arsenio Hall caught the shift. He later recalled Pryor saying, "People say this guy's the new me, but I'm me." For Murphy, that was the turning point. This wasn't mentorship anymore, it was rivalry. And it didn't need to be. In the end, Eddie didn't fire back with drama. He just stepped away. The love and respect were still there, but the bond was broken. Pryor was the legend, Murphy became the king. And sometimes that's the hardest story to write, when your hero becomes your silent rival. But Eddie's not the only one who kept a mental list. If you thought this was intense, wait until you see the celebrities Joe Rogan couldn't stand, on stage, online, and face-to-face. Click here to watch that next. What do you think about Eddie Murphy? Let us know in the comment.